Get this, the World Health Organization now classifies the low-calorie sweetener aspartame as a possible carcinogen.
Now, it's used in several sodas, as you well know, but it's also found in ice cream, chewing gum, and cereal. Despite the new classification, however, the agency did not change its recommendation on daily intake, which remains at 40 milligrams of aspartame per kilogram of body weight. The WHO released a statement saying, quote, while safety is not a major concern at the doses in which it's commonly used, potential effects have been described that need to be investigated by more and better studies.
99X, it's Barnes and Leslie. That clip right there kind of says it all. That's a quick summary of the situation from the World Health Organization. When I first saw this story, Leslie, it sent me into shock.
I'm sure it did.
I thought I was going to die.
You were a little nervous, so you started doing your research.
I mean, I will admit, I drink too many Diet Cokes every day, and I try to cut back, but I always come back.
Well, you know, I don't know if you're addicted to it or not, but I did do a little research on this, so I'm excited we're talking about it.
I want to bring on Amanda Mull wrote an article in The Atlantic, which I love to read all The Atlantic's stuff, but most importantly, I thought she nailed it about, on this topic. So welcome, Amanda. How are you?
Hey.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm doing great, and I'm very excited to be on the show because I grew up listening to y'all in the 90s and very early 2000s, so very exciting for me personally.
No way.
Yes.
Really?
Yes,
cool.
I'm an Atlanta native.
Wow, thank you.
That's so weird. I didn't know you listened to the station. That's really cool to know that these media, there's the connections together. But anyway, then this makes a whole lot of sense. Growing up in Atlanta, you had to be, Diet Coke had to be, or Coke or whatever, or Diet Coke had to be all up in you.
Yes. I didn't live in a house without Diet Coke stocked in it constantly until I was probably in my 30s and had moved to New York long before that. I have always been a big Diet Coke drinker and have therefore consumed a lot of aspartame in my life. So this news was relevant to me.
So did you stop?
I stopped a few years ago in 2016, I think. I had always been a little bit nervous about fake sweeteners because I had heard, rumblings here and there over the years that maybe they would be bad for you. And I never heard anything very convincing, but I started drinking flavored seltzer, which doesn't have any sweetener of any kind in it. And it just seemed like a better idea to do that instead. So I just stuck with that.
I've given it up before for as long as maybe a year and a half. And then there's something about, that taste that brings you back to Diet Coke. And I've tried to mix in, there's a drink called Zevia. Do you know that one?
Yes, I've seen that before.
And it's clear, and they have a blue one that is a lot like Diet Coke-ish. But don't these stories, Amanda, come up every couple of years we get told we're going to die?
Yes, there is sort of this constant stream of somewhat vague and also somewhat scary health information that is always coming from these sort of regulatory bodies or NGOs or, places like the World Health Organization. And there's a lot of vagueness in how this news comes out. It's usually via press release, and it's usually, it sounds scary, but ultimately a lot of it is not based well in scientific facts. It's not based well in long-term studies, and it sounds a lot scarier than it needs to, which is the case with this WHO news recently.
And I think you'd probably have to consume a lot to make it dangerous, but what else should we stay away from that contains aspartame?
Well, the good news is I don't think you really need to stay away from anything that contains aspartame. The WHO designation of possibly carcinogenic, which is what they released about aspartame, is not necessarily something to worry about. It sounds terrible, as these notifications often do, but what it really means is that the WHO is not sure whether or not aspartame might cause cancer, and it's basically everything we consume in everyday life almost falls into this category unless we know it's dangerous. So basically what the WHO has said is that we're not sure whether or not aspartame is dangerous. There's not good evidence that it's a risky thing to consume, and at the levels that most people consume it, it is thought to be totally fine.
Have you read, we're talking to Amanda Mull from The Atlantic. She wrote a great piece called Being Alive is Bad for Your Health. And, I mean, right now, Ozempic's going to kill you. Diet Coke's going to kill you. What is the amount that you think, or have you read, that is safe to drink? Because, I'll call it a habit. I could go from 2 to 6 in a day, depending.
Barnes, that's way too many.
Hey, whoa, doctor.
That's a lot.
Well, I said 2 to 6. If it's like a stressful day and I'm working, I need to really have that extra punch. What have you read?
Well, the guideline has long been, and as far as I understand it, has not changed, that as long as you're not consuming between 12 and 36 servings of these diet sodas or other things that contain aspartame per day for over a long period of time, you are not reaching the level of consumption that is thought to maybe possibly present some sort of risk, although we don't know how much risk. It is a very, very vague sense of danger here, and it should really only come into play if you're consuming really extreme amounts of this stuff over a very long period of time.
Yeah, 12 to 36. Fram, you yelled at me for 6? I'm not even...
I want to ask you, Barnes, are you experiencing anxiety or mood swings?
Only now, because you maybe think I'm going to die for drinking 6 Diet Cokes.
Those are some of the side effects.
Yeah, no, I'm good. So why do they do this? Why is this such a recurring, like everyone, is it just for headlines? But what is the WHO? How do they benefit from, getting everyone all scared?
Well, that's a really great question, and I think it's one that nobody really has a satisfying answer to as far as the WHO goes. I've seen a lot of public health authorities, public health experts sort of beg the WHO to change their system, or at least to not make huge press declarations about these kinds of things, because it really is misleading about risk. And so far, they are not particularly responsive to the concerns of people who deal with scientific communication to the public. But in other situations, you've got a single study coming out of a university research department or something like that. They are trying to get attention for their research because that is how research works. You want people to see it and look at it. But when you actually read the research, it is generally a little bit more tame in its results. Most scientific research on a chemical or a food or whatever is going to tell you that more research is needed, and this suggests a path for further research.
Exactly.
Oh man.
But what happens is then you end up with a headline on a website that says this is found to be dangerous. That doesn't get into all that nuance.
It's exactly what happened.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, when the story came out, the headlines were alarming.
And I think the sensationalism of media just picked up on it, and you can just see the headline on the 5 o'clock news. It's Diet Coke is bad. Film at 11. It's just
exactly.
I don't know. I know some doctors are like no, and some are like you're fine. And all I know is we live in Atlanta, Georgia, where that is the gospel. You do not mess with people's Diet Coke. Amanda, thank you. What other stories are you working on right now? You're my new favorite writer.
Well, thank you. I'm working right now on something about airport perks and overcrowded lounges and security lines. So also really relevant to people in Atlanta.
When that's out, let's talk. All right.
Yeah, absolutely.
Good info. And Amanda, thank you very much for coming on with us.
Thanks.
Thank you so much for having me.
The Morning X with Barnes and Leslie.